Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goose Junkies episode 21. Tonight we have some fun topics to discuss, let's just say, because we are going to be analyzing and looking at baby horror in kids' horror. We're going to be examining Goosebumps' Strained Peas, and we're going to be facing it off against Creeped Out's Only Child. Tonight, I am joined with the two best panelists on the face of the earth, Micah and BD. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. It's your boy BD. And since I had a rough day at work, this episode is basically like my equivalent of Haunting Hours Funhouse. Because some of the media that we're covering tonight, I have spited as a kid. And seeing it now, oh boy, this is about to be one heck of a roast coming up. So I'm very excited for it. It's going to be fun. We're dealing with baby horror. And considering that I'm the baby mama bandit, I got crippling amounts of unpaid child support payments. I'm gonna vent out my feelings in this one. So get ready for a heated episode.
All right, and how are you doing tonight, Micah?
I'm doing good. Just got back from eating dinner at Olive Garden, having some good chicken Alfredo.
Nice, nice. As usual, we're not joined with Spongy tonight, but we will be reading off his thoughts about Strained Peas and Only Child, as well as reading off his comparison. So we wish you were here, Spongy, but hopefully sooner than later you can be on video with us again. But yeah, we have a lot to cover tonight. So we have Strained Peas from Goosebumps. And Strained Peas is a weird, unorthodox style story that originated in the very first Tales to Give You Goosebumps collection. And Strained Peas is actually one of those short stories in Goosebumps that has been reprinted a few times. It was put into a three-book collection in the early 2000s, reprinting the first three Tales to Give You Goosebumps books. Its short story, of course, was turned into an episode adaptation, and it also had a re-release in Thrills and Chills magazine in the 90s. So Strained Peas is definitely one of the more well-known short stories from the Goosebumps line, but it seems to have a very one-sided opinion in the fandom. And Micah, why don't you go ahead and tell us about Strain P's short story and give us an idea what the short story is about?
So basically, Strain Peas, the short story, is about this kid named Nicholas, and he is kind of dreading the anticipation of his new baby sister that his parents are bringing home, named Hannah. And kind of right away, we learn that Nicholas is a big comic book fan, mainly reading Iron Man comics. And when he's reading one of his comics, he finds that this main villain has this, I can't remember what it's called, it's the mark of evil or something like that, that has like on his cheek. And when Hannah gets home, he sees that she has this birthmark on her cheek that looks exactly like this mark of evil. So Nicholas is automatically kind of like, he's already not happy that he has a sibling, but the fact that he sees this kind of just sets him off on this whole like freaked out like tangent basically. And he starts like trying to convince his parents that Hannah is evil, that she's trying to, get rid of him, to kill him, to, there's all these weird things that happen around the house with her. He sees like she's like carrying a pair of scissors towards him that he thinks she's gonna stab him with, or like seeing that her eyes change color, which is like just the natural thing that babies do. And he's like, he pretty much just sees anything that this baby does as a threat against him. And it just kind of escalates to this point where basically the mom ends up, a little spoiler, but the mom finds out that this baby Hannah is not hers, and they got switched at birth with another baby. And there's a twist ending involving the new baby that is just, it's dumb. It's so dumb. It's not as dumb as the episode, but that's all I'm going to say about the short story in terms of the plot. This short story sucks. It's so bad. It's not as horrible as the episode, but we'll get into that later. There's just a lot of dumb character decisions. It's not scary in the slightest bit. Like all the stuff that Nicholas goes on about with this baby and what she's doing, you could easily just be interpreted that as a baby being a baby. Like there's no legitimate proof that this baby is evil. It's all in this kid's head, pretty much. And like it's just, again, it's like he just so desperately doesn't want this sibling that he's like making up all this stuff about what this baby is doing. And it's just like, that's not scary. it's just dumb. And then, as I mentioned, the twist ending with the actual sibling, just it's so cringy and so stupid. Like, I can't get over this. How awful that story was.
Yeah, I have to agree. I'm gonna go ahead and chime on to what Micah says. If you haven't seen my massive movie length review or ranking of all 60 Tales to Give You Goosebumps short stories, Strain Peas is pretty far down in there in my bottom 10 of all of the Tales short stories. And here's the thing about the concept with Strain Peas. It's not that an evil baby sister can't be played up to be scary. The problem with the short story is one, it's like 10 to 12 pages. You don't have any backstory kind of fleshing Nicholas's character out more, maybe involving him and his parents' dynamics. So you have a disconnect with him and his parents' relationship that you can't really build off of with this new kid coming into the equation. When the new kid comes into the equation, what does the story rely on to carry plot? You gotta believe me crap. And I hate it. I hate it deeply when it's played up to be annoying, and it's definitely full on blast here. It's just things happen. Nicholas witnesses it. He gets caught with the baby. He has to explain himself. His parents don't believe him, and it's rinse repeat. That's essentially the story. Now, I do think that in the short story there is a thematic message about coping with getting a new sibling and having to change up how you carry yourself, especially when you're put in a situation when you have to help your parents. It's kind of like you're coming of age in that mature way, and you're also having to overcome, sacrificing attention and putting your best foot forward to grow your family and do right by that for your parents, so you're not becoming a problem, right? Because this is something they can't control. And there is some mild humor to be had with the idea of a baby being the villain, because when you think about babies, they don't have any sense of wrong or right. They have no moral spectrum, so you can't weigh them accountable for their actions. So the natural response for a parent, especially to a newborn beautiful baby girl, is to say, oh, she's perfect, she can't be the one doing all these bad things, she can't be eating your math book, she can't be puking on you on purpose, she can't be trying to stab you with scissors on purpose. I get it. It's trying to be funny in that way, but the problem is it's played up too straight. It's not overly parodic like it probably should be. It should be more over the top. Instead of just having a baby, it should be a monster. Like she forms into a monster and some legitimate threat there where Nicholas fears for his life. If there's some stakes there, it can kind of help the monotony. But there's none of that here. It's just silly little gags that add up with the you gotta believe me, and then the pressure releases. That's all the story is. And it's not entertaining. It's very bland. It tries to be funny and it's not funny. We'll get into that in the episode too, because the episode has almost equal problems when it comes to that. But I will say this: my favorite part about the short story, I do like how dark the ending is with the twist, with the new baby coming into the equation. Baby, what is her name, Chloe or something? What she tells Nicholas is pretty metal, and I'll give the story that. But that's about it. For me, I probably give it like a 2 out of 5 stars. It's even for a short story standard, because I don't do exact ratings for short stories. That's still pretty down there. So not good. BD, what's your thoughts on Strained Peas?
Yeah, so this is one I read a while back, and never been a fan of it. I always thought it was a pretty stupid, cringy story. Some of the big things about it is like Nicholas is a main character, the "you gotta believe me" crap. Never a fan of that. I'm just like Comp. I always think it's stupid. It leads to nowhere. It's very on the nose. Like when you're reading the short story and he's saying all this crap about, oh my God, the baby puked on me. She did it on purpose, that little brat. And it's like, yeah, no one's gonna believe you, man. And then when the whole room is painted, even the dad is like, so you expect me to believe that she opened up all these paint cans, threw all this stuff around, made the crime scene look perfect just to blame you? And he's like, yeah, it's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, dude, it's so played up that it gets annoying as hell. the opening scene with his comic book stuff I thought was going to be pretty cool because I saw obviously Destro and Iron Man, and I'm like, all right, this is pretty rad. I like seeing Stein actually references stuff, and then right away he does the classic soy boy meme, the dude with the glasses and his mouth open. He's like, she's got the mark of evil. I knew it. And it's like, dude, come on, man. There's a lot of cringe in here that just you can't take seriously. Um, it's very predictable. And the main problem I have is that I've read and seen some pretty good baby horror stories that are already out there. Some of the big ones that come to mind are like there's a story in Strange Tales, the comic book series, like early Marvel, which was a baby that ended up on a guy's doorstep and it pokes him with a pin and starts draining his life force, making him become younger and younger while the baby becomes older. You got Ray Bradbury's A Little Assassin. You got Rosemary's Baby. There's good baby horror out there. There's good concepts that you can do involving, the sort of feeling you have where, when you meet a baby, you're uncomfortable. It's fragile, it's developing, you get sort of weirded out by it. But this one is so cartoonish, so Looney Tunes, just all in the wrong ways. And it's hard for me to really get any enjoyment out of it. My favorite scene is probably the scissors scene where she's running up on him or crawling up on him with the scissors because as a kid, when I used to hang out with my baby cousin, one time I had a balloon in my hand, and the little mother effer chased me with a knife around the entire house, and I let go of the balloon, and he still chased me with the knife. So that's what that reminded me of. But outside of that, I give the story like a 3 out of 10. I mean, it's one of the most goofy, over the top stories, and there's just too much cringe in there for me to like it. So those are my thoughts.
I find it funny that you say it's over the top, but here's the thing, and this is where my thought process is with strain peas. It could be something like Fright Night from Slappy World, if it really wanted to be. If you wanted to take Nicholas, make him more engaging, like the character from that story, and you wanted to turn on the humor, make it even more ridiculous. I feel like if the story leaned more into subverting expectations over being a baby. Like if you, like I said, if you make the baby a monster and it could transform into a monster, and it's going around Nicholas's room or something, taking I don't know half the size of his body bites out of stuff, and he's like, "Holy crap, this baby can kill me!" And then there's irrefutable evidence where he's like watching her with his mom nearby, and the baby takes a chunk out of its crib or something, and he's like, "Mom, look what the baby did," and the mom's like purposely like, "How can the baby do that? It's a baby." It's kind of ironically funny that the mom is that naive and that dismissive already about it. But it doesn't land in the humor, and I feel like the biggest disconnect for most fans with the story is that they see this trying to be funny, but it's not landing because it's still played up a bit too straight, and it's not leaning into the parody that it should be. It's trying to be. So that is a whole issue that I will say is pretty evident in the episode as well. But we'll get into Spongy's thoughts on the short story before we get into the episode. So BD, unless anybody has anything else they want to add, let's go ahead and read off Spongy's thoughts, and we'll go from there.
All right. So here's Spongy's thoughts about the Strain Piece short story. He says I kind of like it. Objectively, it's mainly held down by Nick as it flows decently well for the most part, with a standard but passable twist. The main problem for me was the dumb Mark of Evil thing that didn't allow for suspense to build, and as Nick was kind of unlikable. But holy cow, this is so stupid, it's amazing. The highlight being the part with the baby going after him with the scissors. The concept is goofy but takes itself so seriously that it can be hilarious. Even taking that aside, at least the things that happen through this one, which makes it one of the better short stories, oddly enough. If you read it as a ghostwriter doing a parody, it's fun and on its own, it at least has a flow to it. So yeah, I really mostly hated for the idea, which is silly to me, lol. I noticed that people that have had babies tend to like it, such as say podcast and die. Guess they can relate, lol.
Well, Spongy, he brought up a point, and I think this is a subjective point about it being played up so straight that it comes off funny to him. When you have deadpan humor like that, you know, makes me think about The Office. You know, The Office, it isn't always just set up for a joke. It's like they play it straight, but they say it in a funny way, or they act like in a funny way where you can see it and it's funny, right? Deadpan humor can be funny, but you know, I just don't see that personally. But I can kind of understand where he's coming from, because I do agree that it is played so straight that you know it has to rely on subjectivity to enjoy it. Which brings us to the episode here, because the episode is quite a let's say hated thing in the Goosebumps community. It's more well known than its short story counterpart, I feel, at this point, because it has this infamous reputation, particularly dealing with some editing and some effect work they have in the episode. So, BD, since you have a lot to say about this episode, we're going to give it to you first. What is your thoughts about the Strain Peach episode, and what is it about?
So basically, this episode is very similar to the short story, except they kind of expand and add more things involving some of the characters. So Nicholas is not a comic book fan in this one. Instead, he's just sort of like your typical kid. He has a best friend character who's added to the story, and she and him are basically coming up with a science project. I think it involved a mouse and like training it to do something. I don't remember the specifics, but they're working on the science project, and then his parents come home with his little baby sister Hannah. And when she comes home, right away he sort of like kind of takes a liking to her. It's not like the short story where he starts going, "Oh, the mark of evil! Oh my God!" No, he thinks of her obviously as a normal baby sister. He tries playing with her and interacting with her, but he thinks something is a little bit off. And it sort of reminded me about stories of the Fae and changelings, which again, I don't know if that's what this is alluding to, but you usually when you see those type of stories, it's always like when the baby comes in, either the parents or kids think that something's off with it. They can't tell what exactly it is, but they start feeling guilty that they have weird feelings toward a baby. That's what you get in this episode. And then as the story continues, he starts realizing, oh no, Hannah is straight up something else out of this world because unlike the short story, she talks. Yeah, there's openly early on, she's able to talk and she's able to basically threaten Nick. Like she just, makes threats to him, says that, oh, she wants to be an only child, she's going to get rid of him, and stuff like that. And then also, you find out this new aspect to Hannah, which is that she can potentially have telekinetic powers. She has the ability to maybe move things and influence things. So the episode is much more played up that she is actually a sort of otherworldly being. And as the story basically goes on, you have the same "you gotta believe me" stuff woven throughout the story, where crazy stuff will happen and he'll try to convince his parents more and more that she's crazy, and that they're crazy for believing that she's actually their kid, and in turn he looks like the crazy one. So that's played up for a majority of it. The ending to the episode, in terms of when they find out that that's not the baby, same like the short story, you get this limousine pull up, which basically reveals, yeah, this she's definitely an otherworldly being. And the ending is pretty similar to the short story, but it's not as metal as the short story ending is. I'll give it that. The ending short story is a little bit more aggressive. This one just sort of played up for goofy factor, especially with Nick's reaction to it. So essentially, it's the same skeletal structure of the short story, but they did add and expand stuff, like what they've done with other episodes that adapt short stories. Like we talked about Don't Wake Mummy, they did that as well. But the difference, Don't Wake Mummy is really good. This is really baby shit. I hated this episode as a kid, and I rewatched it as an adult, and I still vehemently hate it now. It's just I can point out more of this stupid stuff in it. So first of all, let's talk about the main character, Nicholas. Nick, he sucks, man. He sucks. Now, he's a good actor, and the parents are good actors and actresses as well. And Comp gave us this fun fact before we actually booted up this podcast episode. But the parents in this episode are actually that actor's parents in real life. So you do actually get a genuine family relationship underlying when you see them interact. However, it's severely wasted because, again, they got put into a bad story. They should have been in a better story or a better episode, and it would have been highlighted more. Nick is the main character, just drowns you with this "you gotta believe me" crap. I mean, it's some of the most stupid "you gotta believe me" crap ever. Like it's played up even more than the short story, where she'll vomit on him and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, she did it on purpose. She's out to get rid of me. She wants to be an only child." And then he'll like tell his friend that she ate his math book. Like you literally get the math book and there's a giant like chunk bin out of it and there's like this purple drooly stuff on it, and he says, "Oh yeah, she's out here to get rid of me. She's a monster." And then he has a few other lines that I forgot, but he basically, I think, at one point calls the doctor at the hospital and says, "Yeah, you gave us the wrong baby." And the parents then get the phone call from the doctor saying that their son called them about that. And it's like, dude, how are they gonna believe you? You literally called the damn hospital and said, "Yeah, bro, you gave us the wrong baby. Take this shit back. I want the refund policy." They're not gonna take you seriously, man. And I don't fully blame them for trying to send him away to the grandmas. Now, is that the best parenting move? No. But at the same time, with how he's acting, I would think my kid's insane too. I'd be like, "Bro, what are you talking about, bro?" The best friend character. Oh my God. She was in Headless Ghost. She couldn't act there. You can't act here either way. And the one thing I don't like about her character is she is like vehemently like hyping up Nick to get rid of his or like show dominance over Hannah in the beginning of the story, and then she takes a 180 later when she thinks he's crazy, because in the beginning of the episode she goes, "Oh yeah, you got a baby sister? It's Raps. She's gonna take over your life." And she tells him that like when he's playing with her, like he's like basically trying to like entertain her. He's like, "Oh, you're so pretty, goo goo gaga," and she's like, "You're really playing up this big brother shit? Like you got to put your foot down. You got to put that bitch in her place." I'm like, "What? It's a baby. What do you mean put her in her place? It's a fucking baby, man." Like it's so over the top in that way where it's like I can't even take the side characters seriously. The parents are fine. I think the parents are actually pretty good actors and actresses. They're my favorite part of the episode. I think they do a good job. They're pretty reasonable for the most part, especially compared to the short story where there's a scene in the short story where the baby burps and the mom goes, "She's a genius." You don't get shit like that in this episode. They're realistic parents. Um, the one thing I like about this episode plays into Comp's point, where there's no mystery behind Hannah. It's straight up open to you. She is something more than meets the eye. There's no mystery. There's no leading you on. The point about if they would have made Hannah actually like a monster in the short story is because that is over the top plot wise. But if she's actually a monster in the short story, that connects the dots and makes way more sense for Nick's reaction compared to the mystery that you get in the story. In the episode, there's no mystery. She's actually an otherworldly entity, so you can at least justify why Nick feels the way he does. Problem is, she has horrible effects on her. The talking effects are dreadful. They look straight up laughably bad. The stuff that Hannah does in the episode is not really scary. It's just stupid. You get this weird telekinetic scene in the room where she starts manipulating the doors and starts moving objects, and she can like warp sound. Like he records like her voice to sort of like show the parents as to like incriminating her, and she like messes up with the electronics. So she has telekinesis. She can mess with electronics. Why? Well, I don't know. You tell me. Nobody knows why. It's not explained. There's not even a hint or a lick of a hint as to why she's able to do this crap. And the limousine scene at the end of the episode is playing up that sort of over the top nature, but it's so stupid, man. It's so stupid. When that chauffeur guy comes out and they open up the door and they're like, uh, "Are you here for the baby?" And he just doesn't even reply. He goes, "Baby, give." And then they give over the baby. And then when you get those monster hands, playing with Hannah in the limousine, that shit was stupid, man. They even had a monster emblem on the limousine. They got their own company. Is Monsters Inc. a real thing in Goosebumps? They got their own brand out here. Shit, Apple, you got competition, bro. That's a $1 trillion industry right there. And then the ending to the episode, again, it's very goofy. It's similar to the short story, but it's played up. And that scene of Nick fainting at the end was the rat shit on top of the doo doo Sunday. I would give this episode a 1 out of 10. I have no enjoyment out of this thing. I hated it throughout it. It was annoying. It was stupid. It was even boring at points. And I was like, why is this shit getting dragged on? And just one last remark. That's a mouse. It's not a gerbil. It's a mouse. The entire episode, the main character keeps yelling and scolding his best friend. Stop calling him a rat, a mouse. It's a gerbil. What gerbil has a skinny, pale tail this long, bruh? Are you blind, bruh? This is why we can't trust you with Hannah. You don't even know what a gerbil is, man. 1 out of 10. Stupid.
I find it funny that Rick Drew wrote this episode because I think he wrote another episode, and you'll get where I'm going with this. There are so many slappy tropes that are put onto Hannah, aka in the episode version, her name is Grace. I don't know why they changed the name of her, but her name is Grace for some reason. The baby has slappy tropes, and there's even the moniker mirror scene where the somebody put something on a mirror and the kid gets blamed for it, and he's like, well, I didn't do it, the baby did it. Or when you're in a Slappy episode, oh, I didn't do it, Slappy did it. You have this you gotta believe me crap. And it's kind of obvious that Rick drew inspiration, I think, from another thing that he worked on, but I'll just leave it there. I guess I'll get into my thoughts before we pass it over to Micah. I actually think the episode is a step up from the short story, and here's why. I think there's unironically fun moments in the episode that are funny because I don't know if they're trying to be funny or unintentionally funny, but one of my favorite scenes actually is a scene where Nicholas hears the TV playing downstairs, and he goes downstairs, and you have this whole Dominique Othman and Gerard clown music stuff playing when he slips on the refrigerator door, or he hits it and slips on the floor with the mess on it. Who cares? But he ends up in the room, and the baby is watching drag racing, like cackling. Like, why is she watching drag racing? Like, like what is she doing? It's just obnoxiously loud, and she's like having fun at just waking people up. I just think that's kind of funny, because in my mind, if a baby did find something that devious to be funny, I think that's kind of cute. Um, and I also do like that the themes of the short story is still here, and I do like the subtle change with Nicholas being excited for his sister and getting the rug pulled from under him in this version, because he throws his parents a surprise. He's like, "Look, my baby sister's coming home." Unlike the short story version where he's like, "Oh, this chick is evil. I hate her already." He's like, "No, I'm excited to get to know my sister," and then the sister just kind of bruises his ego and deflates his uh, happiness, I guess, in the situation. Well, I like that aspect about the episode a little more, and I can at least say that about it. But you already kind of touched on this, BD. This episode, for better or for worse, right, lives and dies by this baby. And I'm telling you, the effects, whether we're talking about the dub work or the voices over the baby, whether we're talking about the effects of the mouth over the baby's mouth, whether we're talking about the endless gaggling or cackling of the baby that's on repeat in the second half of the episode, or the obnoxious baby music that gets played in random parts and transitions, and then it randomly cuts into normal Goosebumps music and trying to play up suspense music when the baby's just sitting there just giggling and smiling like a baby, and then you have these poorly dubbed over burp sounds and stuff that don't match her facial expressions. It's goofy stuff like that. It just comes off cringy, right? And we talk about the clown music. Anytime there's a slapstick moment with Nicholas, they play this clown music, like the goofy, that kind of stuff. It's cringy. The humor doesn't land, and it goes back to my same problem I said about the short story. It's not trying to be a smart parody of it, of an idea of a baby sister and an older brother with a maybe an older sibling complex. It's not overdone. It's not overly comedic. I think personally, Rick Drew and Don McCutcheon, the director of this episode, should have looked at the short story and said, "No, we ain't doing that. We're gonna make something different here." And they could have made a whole different idea out of a similar concept and been fine. Been fine from the get go, right? They could possibly scale it back a little bit, pull the story back, go more into Nicholas's backstory, Maybe instead of having her be a baby the whole episode and doing the whole mouth thing over the baby's mouth, how about you just have a monster, a creature in place of her while she's doing her stuff and make it feel more like a creature feature, home invasion type thing, like a Gremlins or something. I don't know, for thought. You didn't have to have the baby trying to be the purveyor of horror in the episode. It doesn't land. And it's one of those things that perplex me. I'm just like, what were they thinking with this? To the editors, to the director, to the writer of this thing, whoever greenlit this episode, you made a bona fide filler episode of season 3. I'm telling you, season 3 is very overloaded with episodes. They could have easily trimmed out 2 of them. I think this one and Teacher's Pet they did not need to make, and I'll say that right now. You could trim them out of the show. Nobody would skip a beat, even though they were gone. That's just my thought. But yeah, I'd probably give this. I'd give it a bad. It's not. It's not meh or anything. It's pretty bad. But I'd probably give it like a 2.6 on my metric, which is like a 5.2. Uh, it's a wash, personally. Um, but Micah, what's your thoughts on the episode?
Well, you guys kind of covered a lot of the same stuff that I would think about it. You know, there's just so much bad stuff. This is easily in my top 10 worst. And like season 3, most of my top 10 worst are from season 3. Like that season is just most of those episodes are just so bad. There's some hidden gems in there, but most of season 3 sucks. But like this episode just has so much weird stuff in it. The way they edit it, as you guys mentioned, is stupid. The whole like baby mouth talking effects look awful. Like, I don't know, the voice actress they hired to do the baby's voice, both for Grace and the baby in the ending, their voice acting is awful. Like, they're not even, it doesn't even feel like they were trying. It seems like they just got some random person from the Scholastic or like Fox Kids headquarters and just throw them into the sound booth and just make some baby talk and just went with it on the first take. Like, it's not good. And just like, I don't know, I think like Nicholas and the parents, they're fine for what they were, but Nicholas can get very obnoxious at times as the story goes on. It's just, it plays up way more silly, as the Goosebumps TV show typically does. It's way more silly than the short story. While there is attempts at making Grace this kind of monster figure, which obviously ties into the ending, it just doesn't work because, again, there's not really many effective ways to make babies scary, especially in kids media. Like, because you can't have that you can't really go over the top with it like you could in something like Rosemary's Baby, for example. Like, and I think that just really severely hurts this episode. Now, yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say about it. It's easily like probably top 5 worst. Like, this is pretty much like right underneath Teacher's Pet for me. It's just like atrocious abominations that should not exist.
Yeah, sadly, I think we already alluded to, like, if you take everything that we said about it, this is one of those episodes that faithfully adapt something that's already not good inherently. And normally, in the past, when we said this about similar episodes, like, they took a poorly handled concept in a book or a short story, and they went more faithful with it and barely changed it enough to make it count. And I feel like maybe with some severe reworking, this episode could have worked. Maybe in that idea that they wanted to, but they needed a lot of differences in the pot than just making Grace or Hannah, whatever name you want to call her, making her, I guess, more of a monster figure and making Nicholas attempt to be more likable. That's really the only effort they put into it in terms of trying to shake it up. Um, So yeah, it's just one of those things that you're going to lose people off the bat. If they didn't like the short story, they're probably going to hate this almost equally or even more than the short story counterpart. So, which brings us to Spongy. If Spongy liked the short story, I have a feeling he's probably going to like the episode. So let's read off what he has to say, and then we'll decide which one we think is better.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I think that a way to think it could have adapted this and just made it better is just use the formula of like what Haunting Hour did with the creature is stirring. Just have the baby obviously be a monster that got planted into this house, have it rain havoc, and then at the end it's revealed, oh, the monster parents actually did release this little baby, or let the parents take this baby home because they wanted it for a certain purpose, and then they just call it back like a pet. So he could have done that, could have done the sort of gremlin thing with the baby. So that's also something that would have improved compared to what we got.
Yeah, talk. I also just talk about like a crappy DVD release too. Having it pair with It Came From Beneath the Sink, like both those episodes suck so bad. Like, uh,
Yeah, definitely not a
like
DVD you want for your birthday.
no.
All right, let's see what Spongy says. I have a feeling he's going to like this one more, so let's see if I'm right. Okay. Oh, I was wrong. I feel about the same as the story, but this is a bit better. Okay. It's fun with the goofiness of the idea, and they got rid of the mark of evil stuff, which makes Nick more likable. It plays more of the idea of him possibly just being jealous, which our other episode explores more. The effects on the baby talking are truly god tier. It's more ironic enjoyment, but I doubt they took it too seriously, lol. It could have gone campier with it. Maybe they needed Ron Oliver on this. Otherwise, there's not too much hugely wrong with it exactly. It just needed to be a bit more fun in certain places, as it has some boring parts. Still, it's also overhated. Certainly not lowest rated upon IMDb bad, but nothing great either.
You know, he did bring up a point with if Ron Oliver was put on this thing, I can only imagine the Dutch angles and all this weird stuff he would have put in the episode to at least make it more unorthodox. But I don't really have faith in the concept as is, you know, to carry an episode. I mean, if you like the effects, if you like how bad it is, and like that so bad it's good way, good for you. Um, but I just feel like BD said, and I've said multiple times now, you need to tweak the idea. You need to go back to the foundation of the story and make it more compelling. Even Spongy would admit it's boring in some places because it leans too much into the "you gotta believe me" stuff carrying the plot. That right there is probably the biggest eyesore about the story in general. Whether we're put aside the bad effects, put aside the bad ADR and all that, it's the plot that it's uninteresting. You got to make that at least stand out, and if you can make that at least fun, maybe people can have fun with the bad effects and think that it's so bad it's good. For thought. So with that being said, that now that we read Spongy's thoughts, which one do we think is better? Do you think the short story or the episode is better? So I'll leave it up to you two to go first, and then I guess Spongy and I will go second because I already alluded to me what I
Well,
prefer.
I guess in terms of my thoughts, I'd probably say the short story is just a little bit better, one goo goo gaga better, because the thing I like about the short story is it is to the point, it is concise. I feel like the plot is the way, because the plot is the way it is. At least the short story is not dragged out. It's just a, to the point. You read it, yeah, you don't like it, you think it's bad, but you can at least forget about it. Like it's just sort of there, hit or miss. The episode is dragged out for 20 minutes. So when you're sitting there and you're seeing all the bad effects, you're seeing all these extra bad layers added, like the best friend, the stuff involving the goofy effects with the baby, the over the top ending and twist ending compared to the short story. I think the short story doesn't stay longer than it's warranted. Meanwhile, everything is dragged out in the episode. So I give it to the short story.
Okay.
Yeah, I
What?
definitely agree. I would give it to the short story because, like, as BD said, the short story you can read through that thing in like 5 minutes. It's 13 pages, big text, smaller pages. Like, it's a really quick read. You're in and out of it, and like again, as I said, like probably takes 5 to 10 minutes to read through that story, versus the 20 minutes you have to sit through the episode, and like I don't know. I just feel like it's easier to forget how bad the short story is because of the fact that you're not having to sit and drag on. But I don't know. I'd agree with the BD completely there. So short story for me.
Yeah, and it's tough for me because even in my like short story versus episode video I made on Strain Peas, conceptually there's not much difference. It's all about context and how they frame characters. I think that what I can appreciate about the episode more is that they at least attempt to do more with Grace, albeit it just adds more "you got to believe me" parts to the story, and that can be frustrating. But it does have some things that I kind of wish were more overt in the short story. And I do like Nicholas better, but I think that the short story has a better ending. I prefer that ending more. I like the dark implications. That's probably the best part about it. Like Spongy, maybe I don't think it's good like Spongy thinks it is, but I do think that for me, I get more enjoyment out of the conceptual execution more so than the short story. Whether we're talking about, you know, which one's more irritating, yeah, I can definitely see the episode being more irritating because you have to sit through it. It is one of those things that makes your eyes bleed and your ears bleed too. But I don't know. It's a toss up for me, honestly. I'd probably give the slight edge to the episode, but like when I compare my score for the episode to the short story I do point 0.5 increments. For the episode I do exact. It's not too far off based on what I do a point 0.5 boost. So it's literally like I'm splitting a hair here to give it to the episode, but I can lean either way. So if we had to go to a tiebreaker, it can be whatever for me. So let's just for the sake of this, because maybe we can just say that since they're both kind of whatever for at least us three, we can just say Strain Peas as a whole for this one. You can take your pick on this one to face off against Only Child here. So Only Child. Let's talk about Only Child. Now, Only Child, the only way to really watch this episode from its parent show Creeped Out is really on Netflix, and we had some trouble getting BD and Micah the episode, so they had to watch somebody's reaction, but they still got to watch the episode through the reaction, but it wasn't the whole thing. But they got the gist of the story here. But I guess I'll share what the story's about here. Only Child, by all stretch of the imagination, is pretty much like a remake of Strain Peas, essentially. It's about this girl named Mia. She's 14. She comes from a single mother household. Recently, her mom has gotten remarried to this man, and she got pregnant and gave birth. She's at the hospital, chatting on her phone, about to document to go inside to meet her new baby brother. And her mom's like, "Hey, don't record me. I just gave birth. I look like a hot mess." And she's like, "All right, whatever." And she picks up this vibe from her little brother when she goes to meet him for the first time, that he seems to stare at her weird. And when she gets near him and tries to pick him up, he cries, and then he stops crying when he goes back to his mom. So she's like, maybe he doesn't like me. And the mom's immediately quick to point out, like, look, he's a baby. You just got to give him some time. You'll get used to him. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about him not liking you. Just because you're not used to having siblings yet doesn't make him that he's out to get you or anything. So she's like, all right, that's fine. And as the story goes along, she tries to help out her parents. Her dad is still working while her mom's on maternity leave. And one morning, the baby is crying on the baby monitor. She goes up to the room, and the baby won't stop crying when she's trying to help him. And then she just says flat out, "Do you not like me or something?" And then the baby stops crying, as in like that's a response, and looks at her right in the eyes. And she's like taken aback by that, like, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And once she asks that question, the door to the closet nearby the baby's crib starts vibrating very violently. And she's like, okay, something's weird's going on here. She opens up the closet, stuff spills out. The mom comes in, she gets blamed for it. She's like, hey, why'd you knock all this stuff down? She goes, I didn't. I just opened the door, right? And this starts the "you gotta believe me" that we're familiar with Strain Peas. And as the story goes along, Mia starts to have these weird interactions with her little brother that makes her think that her brother possibly is sentient and knows what he's doing to her. It starts with stuff like she'll hear some weird noises coming from the baby monitor. She goes to check on in the room, and he's sleeping. And then when she comes back and she hears these weird noises again. And then one night she's sleeping in her bed and she hears this music box playing that's coming from the baby's room. She goes in there and it stops playing, and then some telekinetic power ends up winding the thing in front of her eyes. And when she looks in the mirror, she thinks she sees her brother just standing up in his crib, a newborn baby, looking at her. And she gets freaked out, and she's creeped, like the show's titled, "Creeped Out," right? And because of the noise, her parents come down. They blame her for, playing this music box, trying to blame it on her brother. And it kind of escalates at a certain point where um, she's interacting with her brother, and these blocks that are nearby telekinetically turn around. They read out, say, I want to be the only child. And basically marking a line in the sand that the baby pretty much wants her out of the picture. Well, Mia's had enough, and she's determined to prove that this stuff is happening. And it boils down to a climax where I don't want to give too much away, but through the climax, her mom's involved, and she has a sudden realization in this change of heart about how she's been approaching having a younger brother. And even though that she knows some information that is incriminating against her brother, she decides to play coy and make a selfless sacrifice to keep the family dynamic in harmony. And we get to see what that entails for her by the end of the story. So I feel like Only Child, off the bat, it has those ingredients that should have been in Strained Peas. Mia's connection with her mom is definitely played up in the story. She comes from a single mother household. So she's been with her mom the longest. She now has a new stepdad, a new half brother. So you see that disconnect forming slowly, given the backstory from Mia about her mother and her new marriage, and of course her or half brother coming into the picture. We see this dynamic form in the story where the mom recognizes this with Mia and says, "Hey, look, I'm sorry I haven't been giving you much attention since these two boys came into our lives, but this is our family now, and you don't have to stage these things with the baby to spend time with me. You just come to me and we can hang out, and I'll be glad to talk with you. We can do stuff together." So that's wholesome, and that really does play more onto the theme of being an older sibling, of having to adjust your attention that you're used to getting from your parents to now be shared with something. It's telling that thematic message, similar to Strain Peace, but I think it does it in a better way. I also think that the baby concept in this story is better than Strain Peas. We're not leaning into the talking baby stuff in the episode with the terrible effects. The baby is silent, and it openly has telekinetic powers, and it can understand but not communicate. And in turn, they actually made the baby creepy in this episode. I'm going to say this. The one thing that Strain Peas utterly failed at, especially in its episode, is making that baby creepy. They made this baby creepy. And it's just in terms of, if you're going to play it straight, like Strain Peas try to do at times, lean into it and at least build it up in traditional horror. And they did that here, created a creepier product. And I don't know. It just hits better for me. It does have its problems though. You got the "you gotta believe me" stuff. I think this is just a typecast thing for baby horror at this point. I'm sure that all the stories we'll find in kids horror that are possibly out there involving babies are going to have this element. Um, I don't like it in Strained Peas. I don't like it here. I do think that it has its boring parts. It's kind of dull, kind of predictable, minus the twist at the end. But even the twist at the end, while I like what that entails for the character, I feel like the ending is not the direction I would have gone. So I don't really like the ending that much. But I do think this is a step up in some significant ways. I'd probably give this like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, maybe a 7 out of 10. So that's my thoughts on it. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Micah. Micah, I know you didn't get to watch the episode, but from what you did get to watch, what was your thoughts on Only Child?
I thought it was pretty solid overall. As you mentioned, I agree. Definitely a massive improvement over Strain Peas. I like the concepts better. I like that this actually does try to play it up to be creepy. And while I say you can't make a baby scary, they actually did a very good job in this episode of actually adding a creepy factor to this baby. And some of the stuff it does, like just the scenes of it, like him like standing in the baby or in the crib in the mirror and stuff is really eerie, or just the way it just stares at her very silently, and just some of the stuff it does, like the almost poltergeist like powers it has against like the closet and like flipping the blocks around and stuff. I like a lot of those elements, and I thought that was a really fun and clever way of doing it. I also like the reveal of kind of what this baby is. even though it does kind of lead into a plot hole of like, if this baby is the son of the mom and the stepdad, does that imply something about the stepdad, or was this baby switched at birth? Like they don't really explain like how this baby is what it is, which is probably like the one kind of negative I would have with it. But I do like the way they kind of play up the dynamic between Mia and her mom. She does kind of have that like value and idea of like, even that scene with the stepdad's talking to her and saying like, this is something that your mom has wanted for a while. And, even she still can't believe it's happened. And just do this for her and make her happy, It's, I don't know. I just like that element about it. I just feel like it adds this kind of depth to Mia's character and really helps her kind of gives her the more of the motivation to try and understand what's going on with this baby and trying to figure out how she can deal with it. And I like her selfless sacrifice in the end. I think that was just a really good way of kind of wrapping up the story. I think the acting is all really good. Like Amia is probably one of the better kid actors I've seen in like a kid's horror property. Like I thought she did a great job. And overall, I just thought this was a really good episode. I also gave it a 7 out of 10. Like I thought it was really solid.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you brought up two things I didn't think about, because the fact that you brought up the baby, there's no rhyme or reason why he's like this. It's never explained. I guess they kind of throw it in there to be more of an homage to those, 70s baby movies. There were a few that they were like demonic kids, like Bad Seed, maybe Rosemary's Baby. They're trying to be something like that, but they don't want to get into the explanation because it would get convoluted and you would have to explain more than they have the time to explain. That is a negative too. I agree, but I do see the message of the story overall. I forgot to mention this. The message of the story is supposed to be you love your family no matter who, no matter who they are, right? And that's the kind of forced message in there. Now, here's the thing about loving your family. There's unconditional love, and then there is conditional love, right? If a baby is bona fide evil or a monster and is trying to threaten you, there is some conditional love there. She might have some resentment. She might actually have some motive to get rid of this thing. But at the end of the day, the lesson she learns is that, oh, he's still my baby brother. This is still the son of my mom and my dad, or my stepdad, and I have to be in a family with him. So I'm gonna have to find a way to cooperate and work with him. So that is like the message and the lesson of the story there. How hammered fisted is up to interpretation, but it is there. So great points, Micah. BD, what is your thoughts from what you got to see of Only Child?
I'd probably give this one like a 6.5 out of 10. So it's a decent episode for me. So I think it's definitely an improvement to Strained Peas. I think the two highlights that I want to give, which are the main positives I have, is the characters are really good for the most part. I like all the actors and actresses in this episode. I think that the main character is a lot more sympathetic, obviously, compared to Strained Peas. You actually care about the main character, you see her perspective, and I like the fact that she's actually taking time and effort to try to please her family and try to make it better. So it's more of a connection there to her. I like the parents. I think the parents are more understanding up until a certain point where the mom is very much trying to be there for her daughter. The stepdad's trying to, become more of a parental figure and try to help her out. There's a few good scenes in there, like the beginning scene where they're at the hospital and she's recording the mother, and the mother's like, "Hey, give me a break. I just pumped this thing out." I thought that was pretty funny. You got a chuckle out of me there. So there's much more of like a natural family dynamic that you get between it. It's more believable. Another thing that I like about the episode, which is this is honestly the main highlight, the baby is creepy. The baby would definitely creep me out and lived up to the show title. I like the fact that the baby is not a straight out malevolent evil figure. As you're watching the episode, you can see that the baby's just sort of like abusing its power and just being a baby, but it's not like coherent or I guess straight out being evil, because by the ending you figure out that there's a contract made between the main character and the baby that okay, it's just more so of like an understanding positions of power thing as opposed to the mark of evil is a demon. It's not like that. That's not how it is. And my favorite scene in this episode is the music box scene. The music box scene was really, really creepy. And that silhouette of the baby in the background was some straight up anime villain shit. I was like, yo, the aura behind that baby just standing up in the crib was really, really creepy. I had a stepbrother that I looked after when he was young, and there was a couple times where, you turn around or you look in the mirror and the baby's standing up in the crib. I've had that happen, and it's always naturally creepy. Like it's a little like, you recognize, oh yeah, it's my brother. I love him. He's cute. But then that brief second before that hits your mind, you're like, what the hell is that behind me? So they play that up in this episode. I like the telekinetic abilities of the baby. My main sort of things that are not necessarily gripes, but holding it back is, again, it's a reskin of Strain Peas. It's very, very similar. And after watching Strain Peas, reading the short story, and then experiencing this, I wish they would have taken more creative liberties and added more material than just kind of do like a play by play reskin of it. There's the same you gotta believe me stuff. The telekinetic power thing is there, but that was also present in the Strain Peas episode. It's better done here, but that concept was in that as well. The glowing eye effects are in this one as well, which was also in the Strain Peas episode, but that version was horrible effects. This is actually pretty decent. And my biggest, I guess, weakness to the episode is the ending. I get that thematically it makes sense, but it sort of just felt like a wet fart ending to me, in my opinion. I was expecting there to be a bigger reveal, a bigger thing, because the baby is a bigger threat in this episode. It's more ominous, it's more creepy, and I thought you could have done more with that. But the compromise made at the end is selfless. It's good for character, but in terms of entertainment value, I wasn't very much shocked or surprised. I was like, yeah, it's sort of the easy way out. Sort of, you built up all this cool stuff, and then you end on sort of a mundane ending. So those are my thoughts. I'd give it probably, again, a 6.5 out of 10. It's a decent episode. It's not perfect, not even great in my opinion, but I could see people saying it's pretty good, and I definitely think it's an improvement over Strain Peas. So I would suggest you guys go watch this before you watch Strain Peas, because this is what I think the version should have been.
You know, when I was watching Only Child, I saw the potential here to change up Strain P's formula, and this is my idea. I would have gone with this instead of Mia being close with her mom. Ever since her mom got married to this guy, she's been like apprehensive and like distant from her parents, and she doesn't want to be there when her brother is born, and she has problems with her stepfather. Maybe she doesn't like the guy, maybe he's evil. And when she learns that the baby has some supernatural powers, at first it scares her, but then she's like, maybe I can use this to my advantage, and she tries to teach the baby bad habits to get at the stepfather, who possibly could be revealed to be this demon figure, and the mom had no idea. And then through that, she teaches the baby that his father is bad, but he can be good by learning from her and sticking with her. So they actually team up, and that could be the compromise they come to at the end. That they grow closer, because at first he wants his mom and his dad all to himself. Then he realizes maybe his sister's not so bad. So there could have been a dual thing there, and the stepdad could have got something coming to him. Who knows? But I would have done it up a little bit different to at least shake it up there. But all the potential was there; they just didn't do it. But that's what I was thinking. I think that's interesting. It might be more traditional adult horror. I don't think that's quite kids horror subject matter, but who knows? Um, so let's read off Spongy's thoughts, and then we'll get into which one we think is better.
All right, so let's see what Spongy has to say. All right, so his thoughts about Only Child. While Creeped Out is overall good, Season 2 felt a bit more mixed in places, and this episode is a good example. It's fairly good for most of it. It has a solid idea with decent themes about the girl being jealous of the baby, and that's her issue on top of the baby being evil. There's a few creepy bits early on, and it has valiant attempts at drama. It's understandable why they don't believe her, and again, they try for some themes, but man, you just can't make a baby scary because they try for scares with the baby directly and it's just laughable. But then there's the ending. It just feels cruel after everything she went for, as the mom really should know about all this. all because she doesn't want the baby to turn out wrong. That's a bit iffy. Good thing is the baby is actually wrong, lol. I can respect what they're going for. It has some maturity to it, but it doesn't just sit right with me. It tries and mostly well done in some parts, just to get a bit goofy or rub me the wrong way. Shame. Surprised you didn't like this one. Damn.
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't like. I think he said. Yeah, that they tried to make the baby creepy, but they just can't seem to still make a baby scary. I can kind of see that because let's be honest. There is a certain effect they put on the baby in the episode. Okay, it is kind of laughable. The whole green skin stuff. Mild spoiler, but that was goofy as heck, man. I'm sorry. You could have come up with anything. You could have had him maybe shapeshift into like I don't know the dream catcher from Haunting Hour and be like oh hooga booga and like that would have been scary. But they didn't do that. It's just they make his skin green and like okay, what does this mean? What is he an alien? Like is he an alien baby that was implanted in her? What is this? Who knows? Like Micah brought up, they don't even bother to explain the possible origins or why the baby is like this. It's just in there in the story. And you got to roll with it. It's kind of lazy, and I can kind of see why Spongie's irritated with it too. So that leads us to the comparison. Which one do we think is better, strained peas or only child? Let's start off with Spongie's comparison, and then we'll make the decision for us. But I think I have an
Uh,
idea of which one is going to win here.
All right, so let's see comparison. So this is a weird one. Only Child is better by most metrics. It's actually creepy at points and taps more into the themes of the idea, giving us some solid drama in some parts. It's a respectable story for sure. Strain Peas is just here to have fun. However, Only Child being more serious makes the goofy moments less forgivable, and the ending is just a bummer and not in a fun or especially engaging way. Strained Peas doesn't take itself too seriously, even the episode, which could be more fun in places. The short story is a fun parody, and the episode is generally fine as well. The story has bad moments with the lead, and the episode can be funky, and the old Goosebumps show can be. But I can have fun with them and leave feeling satisfied enough. Only Child is better, but leaves me feeling a bit empty. So, despite its best efforts, I give it to Goosebumps shockingly. If you want the true best version of this idea, check out the So Weird episode Changeling. It's pretty good. Yeah, I need to watch that because again, the whole time I watch Strain Peas and this one, I always think the story about the Fae and changelings is perfect for this kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, Spongy took the fun route for his choice, and if we're talking about which one has more, I guess we can put this in quotations, fun moments. I guess you would give it to Strain Peas, but I'm gonna give it to Only Child personally, for the reasons I said. I just feel like it's kind of like a necessary remake of Strain Peas, in my opinion. Yeah, it didn't execute everything it needed to execute. It does have some of the same ailments. It almost feels too re-skinny for its own good, but at least they were able to play it up straight and make it creepy at moments. I liked the how more streamlined it is, how more relatable it is, how more emotional it is. I think it has a better character too. So yeah, I'm gonna give it to Only Child. Micah, which one do you think is better?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Definitely only child. I feel like, well, again, while you mentioned it's not perfect, strained peas is just an abomination to Goosebumps, in my opinion. So I feel like it's a pretty easy win for me, in my opinion. Like I don't think there was really much competition from the start.
Yeah, I have to agree there. Not much competition here for me personally. BD, we'll end with you. Which one do you think is better?
I'm gonna give it to Only Child as well. The big ups for Only Child is again, it is creepy at points. That music box scene, I don't care what people said, it was scary. It was creepy seeing the silhouette of the baby standing up in the crib after all this crap is happening. And I think that although the episode is obviously more serious than the Goosebumps equivalent, it's not that serious to where it drags down points for me. I mean, you have the whole thing about the cube spelling out, the only child stuff. Like that's goofy. It has points where, it goes back to the goofy route. So I don't think it's too serious that I would take away many points. The characters are better, and that Strain Peas episode is an abomination. Again, like Micah said, listen, if you had baby food, you got Only Child being that vanilla baby food, that stuff that it's mush, but you can, enjoy it. You like the vanilla flavor. Strain peas is that meat and vegetables baby food, that nasty septic scum, man. You don't want that. There's just straight up no redeeming factor for me, so I'm gonna give it to Only Child. Is it sort of bland? Is it not that good? Sure, but is it better? Without a doubt.
All right, so Creeped Out gets its first victory, and it's only comparison we've done so far. So hopefully we get to do more Creeped Out in the future, because so far the show's only 2 seasons. I think it's like, less than 30 episodes in total. It'll be easy to compare some of these, and I think a lot of these you guys would like, especially some episodes that are my personal favorite, like Kindle Sticks and Splinter Claws. If we can ever compare those things to something, I'm totally down. But those are some I really enjoyed from the show. So yeah, so we talked about baby horror tonight, but I think our discussion, we're gonna kind of shift gears and think about, you know, what made horror scary for us as a kid, and I think we're keeping it kids horror for this discussion. On like when we were younger, what were some things that we watched that legitimately scared us, and these are things that kind of shaped our minds. And maybe some of these things that we watched or came across still live rent free in our minds in that mild traumatic way, but we don't view it as trauma. We view it as nostalgia for some reason. So we'll start off with BD, since he came up with the idea for this. BD, what are some things that you found genuinely scary when you were a kid?
So I got three picks that I decided to choose because I remember these things did affect me as a kid, and I didn't want to choose anything too dark. Like I could say, oh, scary stories to tell in the dark. Yeah, it was branded for kids, but that stuff is not kid stuff, man. It's basically adult horror. But the three kids horror stuff that I basically have, first off, was actually the How to Kill a Monster episode. That one used to actually scare me as a kid because I thought the swamp monster was genuinely horrifying. And as a kid, back in elementary school, I had a single mom for a lot of the time. So because I had to deal with the single mom, she would have to go to work. She didn't want to pay for a babysitter, so she's like, "All right, you stay home. Don't open the door for anybody, and just wait till I come home." And that's the deal. So seeing these kids get locked up in this house with this giant swamp monster, and the fact that when it roars, they like remix like an elephant sound with the roar and made it real scary. The design of it is horrifying. So as a kid, that genuinely scared me. Another Goosebumps episode that genuinely scared me as a kid, and honestly still holds up till this day, is the Werewolf of Fever Swamp episode. That barn attack scene, that chase scene inside of the house, the scene of that werewolf snout snarling in the darkness with the shadow behind it, that was one of the scariest things to me as a kid, and it definitely resonated with me from my love of werewolves. I love werewolves to this day. I got a bias towards them, and I think that that episode is what shaped me up. But what started my love for Creature Feature in the most disturbing way is my third and final pick. And I have not watched this movie again in a long time. I have to. We might do it for this podcast. And that's Haunting Hours Don't Think About It. Haunting Hours Don't Think About It had the scariest monster design till this day in kid slash pseudo YA horror. That thing is nightmare fuel. That thing is horrifying. The scene of it having those eggs, the scene where it splits heads, the head splits apart, and you get the two reptilian demon looking heads. That was terrifying to me as a kid. And I remember I used to watch this movie every time it came on Halloween. I would see it every single year, and I was absolutely in love with it. It scared the daylights out of me, but that's sort of what sparked my love for Creature Feature. The fact that you could do this abnormal stuff, the fact that you could go crazy, and yet it would scare the life out of you. Basically, like the kids' horror version of a xenomorph. That's what I always remember it as. If you have the xenomorph, this thing from Don't Think About It is basically a different version of that. So those are my picks.
Yeah, those are some good picks, and I think Don't Think About It would face very well against something Goosebumps, actually. We might get to that later this year, though, closer to Halloween. But yeah, I totally agree. Werewolf of Fever Swamp has its moments, and I do remember being pretty scared, especially in the part two aspect of the episode. It always unsettled me. And yeah, How to Kill a Monster. I can see why that would scare a kid that is home alone a lot. Totally. So yeah, great picks. Micah, let's go with you. So do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I had a few things. So first off, I know BD mentioned he wasn't gonna pick scary stories to tell in the dark, but I am. And one of the things that like really haunted me as a kid, because I saw these books back in like fifth grade, so I was pretty young. And the one that always stuck with me was the Pale Lady. The illustration horrified me as a child. And I'm not kidding. I've only had one time in my childhood where I ever had sleep paralysis. And you know when you have sleep paralysis, you hallucinate. I hallucinated the Pale Lady staring over my bed like in that illustration, and that that messed me up as a kid. And like honestly, I spent like most of my childhood, and honestly, as ashamed as I am to say it, even my teenage years, sleeping with my head under the covers because of that one occurrence as a kid. And I don't know, that always stuck with me. I love how they adapted her into the movie. I thought that was, we'll talk about more in a future episode down the road when we compare the two, but I think they adapted her perfectly in the movie. I think it was great. Some other things that were more kids horror, Goosebumps, Haunting Hour stuff. One, the Girl Who Cried Monster episode. That one terrified me so bad, especially like that first scene of Mortman transforming, and like especially the scene where he's like hunting her down in the library and stuff just really got to me. And it's just such a creepy, suspenseful scene, and just like the monster voice they use, and just the way he's like, you just like hear him like calling out to Lucy as she's hiding from him in this like dark library, was really scary as a kid. Another Goosebumps one that always got to me was the Haunted Mask 2. Mainly this because like transformation stuff always scared me as a kid. And like the scene where Steve like falls down and the mask is like warping on his face and his hands like turn into old man hands. That was another thing that just really unsettled me. And like I don't know, just the idea of that just is and like even though the effects are kind of dated nowadays, like honestly like the dated effects in that scene make it more unsettling for some reason. I don't know why, but just the way they kind of did those effects, just it gets to me. And then kind of a similar vein of like that transformation stuff is this scene from Really You in The Haunting Hour where Lily transforms into the doll. Like that whole scene is like, that always stuck with me too. Just like the idea of like slowly transforming into plastic just sounds like such a horrifying thing to me. Like just kind of turning into any kind of like inanimate object where you may be conscious, but there's nothing you can do about it, is like, again, it's just another kind of scary thing. Again, something that the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie played out very well with Tommy and what happens to him during the Harold scene. Like it kind of plays into that similar idea to me, and I think that that kind of horror just sticks with me more than anything else. So
Yeah, great picks. Micah, you picked one that I was going to talk about, like Haunted Mask 2, and the exact scene. I watched Haunted Mask 2 so many times as a kid, but every time I watched Haunted Mask 2, I usually try to watch it in the afternoon when there was still daylight. But every time it got to the scene where Steve is about to transform and like his hands and stuff, I would watch like this, and I would put my eyes between my fingers and everything because it freaked me out. That's like one of the first times I ever saw body horror, and the way that episode carries it out, and you know, it's not only just that, but it's watching him walk around with sweat coming down the mask, and he's like getting tired and old. That got to me psychologically, and it made me kind of afraid to get old. And I remember when I was a very young age, probably like 4 years old, I brought my Haunted Mask 2 VHS tape to my grandparents' house, and I remember telling them, I was like, "Hey, Grandma, do you want to watch this Goosebumps story with me? It's about a kid turning old like you." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And she watched it, and then I said, "See, like it was about old people." She's like, "I don't look like that." And I just remember that was, it tickled her to death. But yeah, that episode got to me as a kid. Um, and Scary Stories to Tell the Dark. I used to see it in elementary school. Um, I would look at the artwork mostly, and then read through the stories. some of the artwork in there did freak me out in that weird way. Like I wasn't used to like that kind of art when I was a kid. So seeing that and like pairing it with Goosebumps covers and just being mesmerized by some of those that kind of creep me out, like some classic ones I could throw out there. I used to be obsessed with looking at um, the cover of what is the book? I just had it in my head. Night of the Living Dummy 1. We're just seeing Slappy's eyes stare soullessly into you. That freaked me out. Um, I used to think that the cover of what's the other one? Was it Dummy? I think it was also Dummy Two's cover where he's sitting on the bed. Yeah, that freaked me out. I don't know, something about like dummies and stuff freaked me out. But for me, when I was a kid, I had three distinct things that really scared me that I had access to a lot. I already talked about Haunted Mass 2. Um, it's actually an episode that y'all might laugh at me for, but I had this on a Snick VHS tape, and it was one of the only Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes I used to like have access to, and it was called "The Tale of the Lonely Ghost." Now, here's the thing: you have to recognize I was maybe 5 or 6 years old when I was watching this, so when I was watching the story, and when the girl goes into the neighbor's house for the first time and sees "Help Me" written on the wall, and she looks in the mirror and the girl's reaching out, that petrified me because I had never seen anything like that in that way before, and that really opened my eyes up to paranormal stuff. And this was kind of like around that age when I was getting into watching unsolved mysteries and more horror films, and I was watching shows that had scarier segments, obviously made for adults. But I'm kind of cheating here because I don't really classify this as kids horror, but as a kid, I watched this show all the time, and I already brought it up. It's Unsolved Mysteries, with hosted by Robert Stack. I'm telling you, there's nothing else that still gives me shivers down my back than when I hear the theme song to that show come on, and I hear that man's voice. It floods back the primalness in my brain when I watch that show and seeing paranormal investigation segments or treasure stuff that's like dealing with hauntings and stuff, or you have bizarre murders, weird psychic phenomenon, UFO abduction, stuff like that. That got to me, and that really opened and broadened my horizons into horror as well, because I feel like those stuff, like true crime stuff, is a good gateway to get into fictional horror. Because if you can get over the hurdle that some of this stuff can happen in real life, and you come to accept it, you can accept it more on a fictional basis. But to me, that show, oh my lord, it scared the crap out of me. And I used to watch it to get scared, and I enjoyed it because it made me get chills. And if I was alone in the dark, still to this day, if I'm like this, it gets to me a little bit, and it actually makes me feel uneasy, and it actually genuinely still kind of scares me. But like I said, in that program primal way. Um, so that's all I brought to share. But yeah, I think that was a great discussion, y'all. Thanks for sharing that and bringing up what scared you as a child. So yeah, that wraps up tonight's episode, episode 21 of Goosejunkies. Everyone, if you liked the stories that we shared tonight, let us know down in the comment section. What do you think about Only Child from Creeped Out or Strain Peas from Goosebumps? We're dying to know. If you aren't subbed to my channel, and if you aren't keeping up with Goosejunkies, I do have a playlist on my channel. You can get caught up to speed, especially if this is your first podcast episode. We have them all listed in order. You can start from the beginning if you like. Please go sub up Micah's stuff that will be linked in the description, and go sub up and follow BD's stuff that will be linked in the description as well. We have stuff for Spongy, including a family GoFundMe page. If you have some spare money and you could possibly help his family in a time of need, that would be greatly appreciated as well. And until next time, we do have something planned for episode 22, and we're going to announce it here. We decided to go beachy and ghostly a little bit, kind of here. But we decided to pick a classic original 62 Goosebumps story, Ghost Beach, and we're going to face it off against a haunting hour tale known as The Ghostly Stare. So stay tuned till next time for that. Until then, we hope you take care and Have a good one.
Deuces.